20 years ago, U.S. forces invaded Iraq under the pretense of destroying weapons of mass destruction. After bringing down the statue of former Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein, the U.S. wanted to chart a so-called democratic course for the Iraqi people and promised to build a country with a Western-style democratic system. Young Honglin was the first Chinese ambassador to Iraq after the U.S.-led invasion of the country. He witnessed the chaos in the years following that and the destruction that the war has brought to the country. Exactly to what extent was the country and its people suffering? Why was the country plunged into such turmoil? I had an exclusive interview with Yang Honglin, former Chinese ambassador to Iraq. 当时的治安情况怎么样？
Conflict was erupting in Iraq then. Gunshots, explosions, and kidnappings were frequent. American helicopters flew overhead at low altitude, creating deafening noise. Armored vehicles, tanks, and patrol cars were driving on the streets. Gunshots, explosions, and blasts were heard one after another. Security was not guaranteed.
给您印象最深刻的一个事件是什么？如果现在让您回忆的话。
The most impressive story is that when going to work, one might encounter danger at any moment, and I had several close calls with death. One time was especially dangerous.
When embassy officials and armed police escorted me to the airport.
I suddenly sensed something was wrong while we were approaching the last checkpoint. There were too many vehicles and people. So I quickly got off the car and negotiated with the US military to take the army lane instead. Just as I arrived at the airport, the checkpoint exploded.
大概有多长时间的间隙？
It was about 5 minutes, and if we haven't taken the army lane, the consequences would have been unimaginable.
Later, when embassy officials and armed police went back there,
they saw shattered car fragments and body parts and blood everywhere, which was really shocking. Also, we encountered several other dangerous situations during our trips, such as gunfire with bullets flying over the car. We also came across a car bomb whose shock wave shook our car violently. It was quite close.
当时伊拉克人民的生活情况是怎么样？就是2004年，您在那是2004年10月到达，然后您的
到2005年10月份离任。当时任期呢是1年。
During my one-year term, I witnessed the Iraqi people's living conditions. They were very miserable and suffering in hardship. The war had caused severe destruction to the infrastructure of Iraq. Iraq has high temperatures for 8 months of the year. The temperature could reach 50 to 60 degrees Celsius. In addition, there was only 4 to 5 hours of electricity supply each day. That's the first issue. Second, the water facilities had been seriously damaged. The pipes were old. Every time the power was restored, the water that flowed out of the pipes was muddy. In addition, the food was also very monotonous, such as carrots, tomatoes, onions, etc. Basically, there were no green vegetables.
这在您在伊拉克待的那一年的时间里，一直都是这样吗？
Yes, it was like this the whole time.
所以对比这两次的这个伊拉克人生活的状况，您觉得是一个什么样的变化？就是在伊拉克，就是美国侵略伊拉克之前，是吧？虽然伊拉克已经有了制裁，以及美国入侵伊拉克之后，
就是美国发动伊拉克。
Before the US launched the Iraq War, although Iraq was still under the toughest sanctions because of its invasions of Kuwait, it was allowed by the United Nations to trade oil for food. That is the first point. In terms of employment, although the income was not high then, people had jobs and social order was basically stable. There were no such events as robberies, killings, or explosions.
可以拿到这个粮。
2004年，美国的布什政府也提出了大中东民主改革计划。您觉得这个改革计划的实际目的是什么？另外，他们这个民主改革计划的结果怎样？
The purpose was to use US standards to transform Iraq. If this model had succeeded in Iraq, then it would have been promoted to other countries in the Middle East. The Greater Middle East Initiative was strongly opposed by the Iraqi people
这个反对，
为什么？
因为它是美国的
because it was American standards. Iraq is an ancient civilization. It has its own traditional culture and customs. The so-called democratic standards of the United States did not match the situation in Iraq, so it didn't fit the country, and it ended up with no success.
不了了之。
您觉得美国在这个计划的推广过程中，他是真心实意的相信这一套，还是说以这一套为说辞来实现他的就是地缘政治或者其他方面的一些？
美国呢，就是搞这个大中东计划的目的，并
The purpose of the initiative was not for the Iraqi people, nor the happiness and safety of the people in the Middle East,
而是为了美国的这个
but for the profits of the US.
实现美国在
It aimed to control the politics, economy, security, and energy of the Middle East.
他就控制这个地区，
They wanted to transform Iraq and the Middle East countries into their vassal states.
改造成美国
This is unilateralism and hegemony,
这种类
which inevitably faced strong opposition and resistance from the Iraqi people.
大岛主义的这个行径，必然的就遭到了这个伊拉克人民的强烈反对和这个强烈抵制。
您有没有一些具体的例子，或者说就是给您留下比较深刻印象的？
我就觉得，就是伊拉克人呢，还是
I feel that the Iraqi people are proud of their own civilization and culture.
这个引以为豪的。
They see themselves as an ancient civilization, while the US has only a history of 200 years. Moreover, the democratic standards that the US touted were just deceiving and didn't have any benefits or advantages to them. Instead, it brought about chaos.
带来的是动乱。
The Iraqi people would ask, why should we do this? They are not willing to abandon their wonderful culture and traditions.
文化和这个优良的这个传统。
美国人对于重建伊拉克有没有付出他们应该付出的努力？
我觉得没有，他们
I don't think so.
美国在伊拉
They
克
do not care about economic reconstruction or improving the livelihood of the Iraqi people.
改善伊拉克的民生，
What the US wants is to reinforce its presence in Iraq to gain benefits and serve its own strategic interests.
就是伊拉克的利益，为美国的这个战略服务。
后来伊斯兰国给伊拉克带来的巨大的伤害，您觉得和美国的插手有什么样的联系？
伊拉克处于一种这个战乱的这个环境。伊拉克
After the Iraq War, Iraq was in a state of turmoil and became a gathering place for anti-American armed forces, which included many elements such as former Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein's loyalists, anti-American factions within Shia and Sunni nationalists, branches of Al-Qaeda, etc. They gathered and grew in Iraq, all with the goal of fighting against the US, resulting in a stalemate at the time.
处于一种就是焦灼的这个状态
伊斯兰国也是其中之一，是吗？
之一。后来呢，就是他的势力
Yes, later on, its influence grew significantly, and it became one of the main anti-American forces, with their activities mainly concentrating in the northern regions.
北部地区。
所以这种战乱交织，这种就是你打我，我打你的这种混战，也是美国
一手造成的。因为美国呢，就是
Yes, it was caused entirely by the US, because the Iraq War was a concrete manifestation of its unilateralism and hegemony. This war brought about deep distress for Iraq and its people. Moreover, it also had a very serious and far-reaching negative impact on the Middle East region. To this day, such impact still persists.
到目前为止，就是这种影响呢仍然存在。
您具体指？
具体比如说呢，就是那个。
For example, its infrastructure had been severely damaged, and Iraq needs to rebuild its infrastructure and develop the economy. Another point is to maintain the stability of the country. As a friendly country to Iraq, China fully supports Iraq's efforts to maintain national stability, develop the economy, and improve people's livelihood. China has also provided Iraq with help and support to the best of its ability, which reflects China's image as a responsible major country dedicated to upholding justice. Therefore, the Iraqi government and people highly praise China for its efforts.
表示高度的赞扬。
您怎样看待美国发起伊拉克战争的合法性和合理性？刚才您稍微提到了一点哈，您怎么具体的看？现在再回问。
美国发动伊拉克战争。
It was a blatant manifestation of unilateralism, and it lacked the authorization from the United Nations. As for the reasons, the US accused Iraq of possessing weapons of mass destruction with only a small tube of washing powder, and then waged a war. There were also hundreds of thousands of troops from the US allies that participated in the war. The United States deployed many weapons, such as depleting uranium ammunition, with catastrophic consequences in Iraq. It is highly lethal and with strong armor-piercing capabilities. In the first Gulf War, the US used about 260 tons of depleted uranium ammunition.
However, according to Iraqi media reports, in the Iraq War, they used 2,600 tons, which is 20 times the amount of depleted uranium ammunition deployed by the US and NATO in Kosovo.
This weapon could cause severe harm to people's metabolic system. For instance, soldiers in the US and UK developed blood diseases and had other symptoms such as dizziness and weakness. In order to overthrow Saddam Hussein's regime, it used every weapon available, regardless of whether it was internationally banned or not. The US is very hegemonic in this regard.
美国很霸道。
您认为美国为什么一定要把萨达姆推翻？
因为美国呢就认为萨达姆。
Because the US believed that Saddam Hussein was challenging the US, so it had to eliminate him and maintain its dominant position in the Middle East. During the Iran-Iraq War, the US and the West supported Iraq, but later, Iraq invaded Kuwait, triggering the first Gulf crisis. After Iraq was driven out of Kuwait, the United Nations imposed the harshest sanctions on Iraq.
联合国呢对伊拉克实行了最严厉的制裁。
所以萨达姆开始反美。
对，跟美国叫板。
Yes, it challenged the US. So the US believed that this posed a serious threat to its interests in the Middle East and wanted to get rid of it. So they found this excuse. Iraq is a sovereign and independent country. The US started a war based on this groundless excuse and overthrew the Iraqi government. This is a violation of international law.
就把人家政权给更迭了，这是违反国际法的。
您觉得现在伊拉克的主权回来了吗？
伊拉克在。
Iraq is making efforts to maintain stability, which is important for the country's economic development and improving people's livelihood. So we fully support Iraq in these aspects.
我们呢是全力支持伊拉克呢。
这个过程应该说一直到最近几年才就是有相对比较好的改善。是吧？特别是伊斯兰国到2017年左右才被，就是基本上。
What path Iraq takes and what kind of political system it adopts is a matter of Iraq's internal affairs, and will respect the choice of the Iraqi people.
但是这个历程是不是很难？您觉得这个过程，因为用了这么长时间。
因为它现在经济恢复呢，还有。
The recovery of the economy and stability takes time and effort. Iraq is making efforts, and it also needs the support of the international community, especially friendly countries, to find a development path that suits its own national conditions. This process takes time.
它需要时间，也需要一个过程。